Hey, what's up, universe? Happy 2021. So, this is episode number 13 of It's a Choice. And in this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about risk. I don't believe I've spoken about that before. And really, it's synonymous with choice, right? And if we were to take a look at what the definition of risk is, it's a situation involving exposure to danger, the possibility that something unpleasant or unwelcome will happen. And this third one is the best. A guess, an attempt, or a choice made with little or no evidence or knowledge. And I'm sure I've mentioned it before in previous podcasts, my previous highest value and something that's still, just kind of innate in my personality is adventure. I've changed, my highest value to be, love, to come from a place of love. But at the same time, really for this episode, for all intents and purposes, let's be serious, right? Love is an adventure. Love totally has some risk, right? There's definitely some unpleasant or unwelcome things that may happen when we love people or choose to love people or choose to open ourselves up for that. So there's just a lot of risk in choice, right? Basically when you choose something, it's to like the mutual exclusion of something else, right? You're choosing one thing over another. You're making a fork in the road in a sense, or at least you're deciding to go down one path and maybe not another. There's some quotes that kind of play into that I found that I enjoy. This one here is by Edwin Markham. It's, choices are the hinges of destiny. I like that. And then there's other quotes here about, your life is a result of the choices you have made. If you don't like your life, start making better choices. That kind of a thing. There's another quote that I just read, and let's see if I can remember it. Not gonna happen. It's something about how the person, I'm gonna mess it up. Anyway, whatever. There's risk in not remembering shit. But what I kind of wanted to speak to, what kind of got me thinking about, the whole idea of risk and choices and things like that was just the definition of risk. And because I've basically lived a life of adventure in one form or another, a lot of my life, I'm very familiar with risk. I enjoy taking risks, in certain capacities and in certain ways. Like there's other ways where I'm totally sheepish and I'm not going to engage in certain forms of risk, which plays into my own stories and interpretations around those areas in which I won't do it, right? Like you won't see me rock climbing, but you'll see me potentially take other types of risks, most notably in my life, financial kinds of risks, or relationship kinds of risks, or just other choices that, others may not choose to do, like getting rid of all of my things, choosing to uproot myself and change the dynamics of my family and my relationship with my children, that kind of stuff. There's all risks to that, right? And that plays into the last episode where, in my mind at least, where we don't know, if something appears fortunate or misfortunate, we don't really know the outcome of that. So that's what allows me to play in those areas, that's how I'm able to give myself permission to make those kinds of choices and to take on those kinds of risks, because there's way too many times in my life where things have appeared to be negative and they've totally turned out for the positive. I believe I even spoke to that in the very first episode around intuitive decision making. You got to just say fuck the fear on appearances, because that shit will it could potentially, keep people from from allowing themselves to experience something that is actually really gold for them. And then where we have this definition of risk here, where it's a choice made with little or no evidence or knowledge, which plays right into my whole podcast here about intuitive decision making and living an inspired life, is that when you go with that guidance, yeah, you could say it's risky, but I would argue that life itself is risky. Even if you were to fucking have all the data in the world, you still don't know, like, what the outcome is actually going to be. It can appear fortunate, but it could ultimately end up misfortunate. You just don't know. So data collect all you want. Or you can live an inspired life and take that risk. I mean, there's no guarantee that that's going to lead you to gold either. It's just what is, I guess, more in alignment for what you feel right for you, and for me, it's always following my heart. It's always following my intuition and allowing myself to live an inspired life that way. And to kind of speak more into risks, there's costs, right, associated with risks or choices. There's always a cost with a choice or a risk, When it comes to choices, if it's mutually exclusive, you're obviously choosing one thing over another and one experience or road over another without any solid guarantee that it's going to lead you to where you thought you might go or where you would like to end up. And I just, I know in my last episode, I didn't want to dredge up things from my, with my family and things like that, but just making my own choices, like doing this podcast or just kind of showing up in a certain way and expressing certain opinions and deciding to be authentic in my own family, has definitely had its own, risks and costs associated with it. And my thing, right, with all the choices that I make, I have to accept the consequences of those, which I have no problem doing. But at the same time, it was a risk that I took back in late October, when I came back to Kansas City. And it just continued to snowball in a way, and the costs are becoming evident. And that's okay, But it was a risk, and I knew it when I did it, and I still chose to do it because it wouldn't have mattered. I already knew the risk of not, being authentic and disingenuous and not true to myself. I had already been paying that price for decades, so I knew what the cost was. I knew what the risk was, and I said, "Fuck that! It's time to take on a different risk," And I guess I'm just speaking to, a lot of the podcasts that I've already done, the fuck fear, choose your own adventure, what have you been denying yourself, fortune versus misfortune, all of those things plays right into the idea of risk and what do you allow yourself to choose, because there's a lot of, when we think of risk, I believe anyway, most of us, we've been taught that it's just dangerous, it's something to minimize, right? Everybody's always looking to minimize their risk, which is understandable. I mean, it seems intuitive, right? You want to minimize the risk. Maximizing the risk is really nothing that you ever seem to hear anybody say. I want to maximize my risk. You're like, why? But at the same time, taking the biggest risks can get you the biggest rewards. That can happen in all sorts of areas of your life. You can definitely see that in the financial markets, nothing ventured, nothing gained is one of my favorite quotes. Fortune favors the bold. Both of those quotes presuppose that if you're willing to put yourself on the line, which is to risk and risk big, then you have the potential to also be rewarded in proportion to the risk. And of course, part of the risk is that you don't get rewarded in proportion. But the other part of this too, the whole fuck fear episode, is that, and the whole idea of fucking fear around risk and just life in general is, you come into this whole world with nothing. You leave with nothing. The in-between, that's your story. That's your adventure. That's your quote-unquote risk. Your whole life is a risk. Your whole life is a choice. So, is there really anything to be concerned about? One of the quotes in one of the more recent episodes of season 5 in The Expanse, there's a character named Amos, and he was talking about his mom, and he's like, my mom didn't save me. She taught me how to save myself. She taught me that you either sink to the bottom or you rise to the top. Everything else in the middle is just churn. And that's a choice, and that goes with risk too, right? Where are you going to go? How are you going to play the game? What are you going to allow yourself to do? So, and that's just the kind of, when I think about it in context of my children, that's why I allow myself to do what I do and to make the choices I make and to have the relationship that I do with my children, because I want them to give themselves permission. I want them to know it's okay. Choices, make the wrong one, guess what? Make another one, Again, not that there's not risk or cost to that. And sure, you make, sometimes you make a choice and there's not any going back, but you can still continue to make choices. And you get to choose how you're going to interpret the situation. You get to choose the energy you bring to it. You get to choose the story. You get to choose your belief. You get to choose all of that shit. So even if you end up making a choice that sets you on a course that's extremely mutually exclusive and there's no going back, it's an event horizon, it's fine. You still get to make choices. It just reminds me of another movie. I watch a lot of movies and shows. Papillon, right? That movie's about choices. If you want to get down to it, guy gets framed for some shit he didn't do. Goes through some, I think what most of us would call some pretty tough bullshit in prison. But the way he chooses to go through that, the way he chooses to show up, the way he chooses to manage himself, that's a very mutually exclusive kind of a thing. He didn't choose what he got basically framed for, but he did choose how he responded. And it was a very mutually exclusive scenario. He had a free life and then he didn't. And then how he chose to manage that was pretty phenomenal and remarkable. So, same kind of a thing with anything else that seems to set you on a course that you can choose to seem as unfortunate, but that's a choice. That's your interpretation. Anyway, I don't need to keep going on about this necessarily, but it just kind of struck me to maybe just kind of mention risk in the context of choices. And I definitely have a lot of experience with playing with risk. And I say play with risk because that's kind of what it is for me, in a way. I like to think that I do calculated risks, thinking about, the over and under, what's the benefit and what's the cost. And yeah, I definitely have an appetite for some risks that others don't. But that's all of us. We all have that. We all have that capacity. I'm not saying I'm special in any regard. It's just something that I acknowledge. So I guess in that regard, where do you guys take risks? Where do you decide that you're going to go ahead and put it on the line? And necessarily too, it's not even necessarily something that you're risking by choosing a gain. You could be taking a risk by exclusion, by not choosing something. There's a risk in playing safe too, because that's a mutually exclusive kind of a thing. Again, you see that in the financial markets. Be like, I don't want to take on those risky investments because I don't want to take the risk, but the reward isn't the same. It's not, playing safer doesn't necessarily get you the bigger reward, but it, of course, doesn't have the downside as much either. And I think it's funny how we kind of contextualize it as well. What's the upside and what's the downside? When in all actuality, it's just a matter of interpretation, like, again, because things that appear negative, you don't know. So you lose $1 million in a fucking investment. Is that shitty? I'm sure it doesn't feel good. That money is energy that has now been allocated somewhere else, and it's not necessarily in your pocket, and that appears misfortunate. But your life's not over. You didn't die. And even if you did die, you're not going to be able to take it with you anyway. So is it really unfortunate? I mean, if you're still alive, you still have some days left to live, and who knows what's going to come back? Who knows what's going to happen when you've lost that, so to speak. Anyway, I'll let you all go. Happy 2020. Thank you all for listening. This was definitely a meandering podcast, and I am going to get my sons on here. I'm going to have them on as guests. So probably not my next episode, not next week, but I'd like to do the week after. Perhaps next week, I'm not for sure. But anyway, just putting it out there. I like to bring my boys on and have them start speaking to some of their thoughts around choices, and maybe speak a little bit to how they interpret my choices. Kind of get a perspective from the people that I have directly influenced with my choices, and just also the people I've probably mostly impacted with my own philosophies. Anyway, I love you guys. Have a good January 5th, and I will talk to you later. Bye. Hey, universe. I can't believe it. I totally did it. I totally spaced the end of my podcast. I totally forgot my outro. Just straight up forgot it. Go live an inspired life. Go do that so you can inspire others to live an inspired life. Because at the end of the day, living an inspired life, it's a choice. All right. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.